Tonight is 30th of July 2010. Now we come to Sutta 27 of the Majjhima Nikaya, Chula Hati Padopama Sutta, the shorter discourse on the simile of the elephant's footprint. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. Now on that occasion, the Brahmin Janusoni was driving out of Savatthi in the middle of the day in an all-white chariot drawn by white mares. He saw the wanderer Pilotika coming in the distance and asked him, "Now where is Master Vachayana coming from in the middle of the day?" "Sir, I am coming from the presence of the recluse Gotama," that means Samana Gotama. "What does Master Vachayana think of the recluse Gotama's lucidity of wisdom? He is wise, is he not?" "Sir, who am I to know the recluse Gotama's lucidity of wisdom? One would surely have to be his equal to know the recluse Gotama's lucidity of wisdom." Master Vachayana praises the recluse Gotama with high praise indeed. "Sir, who am I to praise the recluse Gotama? The recluse Gotama is praised by the praised as best among gods and humans." What reasons does Master Vachayana see that he has such confidence in the recluse Gotama? "Sir, suppose a wise elephant woodsman were to enter an elephant wood and were to see in the elephant wood a big elephant's footprint, long in extent and broad across. He would come to the conclusion, 'Indeed, this is a big bull elephant.' So too, when I saw 4 footprints of the recluse Gotama, I came to the conclusion, the Blessed One is fully enlightened, the Dhamma is well proclaimed by the Blessed One, the Sangha is practicing the good way. What are the 4? Sir, I have seen here certain learned nobles, Katya, who were clever, knowledgeable about the doctrines of others, as sharp as hair-splitting marksmen. They wander about as it were, demolishing the views of others with their sharp wits. When they hear the recluse Gotama will visit such and such a village or town, they formulate a question thus: "We will go to the recluse Gotama and ask him this question. If he is asked like this, he will answer like this, and so we will refute his doctrine in this way. If he is asked like that, he will answer like that, and so we will refute his doctrine in that way." They hear the recluse Gotama has come to visit such and such a village or town. They go to the recluse Gotama, and the recluse Gotama instructs, urges, rouses, and encourages them with a talk on the Dhamma. After they have been instructed, urged, roused, and encouraged by the recluse Gotama with a talk on the Dhamma, they do not so much as ask him the question, so how should they refute his doctrine? In actual fact, they become his disciples. When I saw this first footprint of the recluse Gotama, I came to the conclusion, the Blessed One is fully enlightened, the Dhamma is well proclaimed by the Blessed One, the Sangha is practicing the good way. Again, I have seen certain learned Brahmins who were clever in the same way, knowledgeable about the doctrines of others, as sharp as hair-splitting marksmen. They wander about, as it were, demolishing the views of others with their sharp wits. So, similarly, when they hear that the recluse Gotama will visit such and such a village or town, they formulate a question. Thus, we will go to the recluse Gotama and ask him this question. If he is asked like that, he will answer like this, etc. So, in the same way, they become his disciples too. When I saw this second footprint of the recluse Gotama, I came to the conclusion, the Blessed One is fully enlightened. The Dhamma is well proclaimed by the Blessed One. The Sangha is practicing the good way. Similarly, again, I have seen certain learned householders who were clever and knowledgeable about the doctrines of others, as sharp as hair-splitting marksmen, etc. In the same way, they come to argue with the recluse Gautama, and in the end they become his disciples too. When I saw this third footprint of the recluse Gautama, I came to the conclusion, the Blessed One is fully enlightened. The Dhamma is well proclaimed by the Blessed One. The Sangha is practicing the good way. Again, I have seen certain learned recluses who were clever, knowledgeable about the doctrines of others, as sharp as hair-splitting marksmen. They wander about, as it were, demolishing the views of others with their sharp wits. When they hear the recluse Gautama will visit such and such a village or town, they formulate a question thus: we will go to the recluse Gautama and ask him this question. If he is asked like this, he will answer like this, and so we will refute his doctrine in this way. If he is asked like that, he will answer like that, and so we will refute his doctrine in that way. So, in the same way, they do not so much as ask him the question, so how should they refute his doctrine? In actual fact, they ask the recluse Gautama to allow them to go forth from the home life into homelessness, and he gives them the going forth. Not long after they have gone forth, dwelling alone, withdrawn, diligent, ardent, and resolute, by realizing for themselves with direct knowledge, they here and now enter upon and abide in that supreme goal of the holy life, for the sake of which clansmen rightly go forth from the home life into homelessness. They say thus, we were very nearly lost, we very nearly perished. For formerly we claimed that we were recluses, though we were not really recluses. We claimed that we were Brahmanas, holy men, though we were not really Brahmanas. We claimed that we were Arahants, though we were not really Arahants. But now we are recluses, now we are Brahmanas, now we are Arahants. When I saw this fourth footprint of the recluse Gautama, I came to the conclusion, the Blessed One is fully enlightened. The Dhamma is well proclaimed by the Blessed One. The Sangha is practicing the good way. When I saw these four footprints of the recluse Gautama, I came to the conclusion, the Blessed One is fully enlightened, etc. Stop here for a moment. So here, this Janusoni, Brahmin Janusoni, there are other suttas concerning him. Here he must have probably not met the Buddha yet. So when he saw this wanderer Pilotika and asked him about the recluse Samana Gautama, the Buddha, and this wanderer Pilotika was full of praise for the Buddha. And he said he saw four footprints of the Buddha that convince him that the Buddha is fully enlightened, the Dhamma is well proclaimed, and the Sangha is practicing the good way. The first three concerns nobles, Brahmins, and merchants. The householders here refers to the merchant class. So he said he saw these three types of people come to argue with the Buddha, but instead of arguing, instead of refuting the Buddha, after listening to the Dhamma, they don't even ask any question, and they become the Buddha's disciples. Similarly, recluses, other ascetics who came to argue with the Buddha, after listening to the Buddha's Dhamma, they understand and they asked to become disciples, monk disciples of the Buddha. And after becoming Buddhist monks, after practicing for several years, they attain arahanthood. So because of these four footprints, this wanderer Pilotika is convinced that the Buddha is fully enlightened. When this was said, the Brahmin Janusoni got down from his all-white chariot drawn by white mares, and arranging his upper robe on one shoulder, he extended his hands in reverential salutation towards the Blessed One, and uttered this exclamation 3 times, Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa, which means homage to the Blessed One, accomplished and fully enlightened. He said this 3 times. Perhaps sometime or other we might meet Master Gautama and have some conversation with him. Then the Brahmin Janusoni went to the Blessed One and exchanged greetings with him. When this courteous and amiable talk was finished, he sat down at one side and related to the Blessed One his entire conversation with the wanderer Pilotika. Thereupon the Blessed One told him, "At this point, Brahmin, the simile of the elephant's footprint has not yet been completed in detail. As to how it is completed in detail, listen and attend carefully to what I shall say. Yes, sir, the Brahmin Janusoni replied. The Blessed One said, Brahmin, suppose an elephant woodsman were to enter an elephant wood and were to see in the elephant wood a big elephant's footprint, long in extent and broad across. A wise elephant woodsman would not yet come to the conclusion, indeed, this is a big bull elephant. Why is that? In an elephant wood, there are small she-elephants that leave a big footprint, and this might be one of their footprints. He follows it and sees in the elephant wood a big elephant's footprint, long in extent and broad across, and some scrapings high up. A wise elephant woodsman would not yet come to the conclusion, indeed, this is a big bull elephant. Why is that? In an elephant wood, there are tall she-elephants that have prominent teeth and leave a big footprint, and this might be one of their footprints. He follows it further and sees in the elephant wood a big elephant's footprint, long in extent and broad across, and some scrapings high up, and marks made by tusks. A wise elephant woodsman would not yet come to the conclusion, indeed, this is a big bull elephant. Why is that? In an elephant wood, there are tall she-elephants that have tusks and leave a big footprint, and this might be one of their footprints. He follows it further and sees in the elephant wood a big elephant's footprint, long in extent and broad across, and some scrapings high up, and marks made by tusks and broken off branches. And he sees that big bull elephant, at the root of a tree or in the open, walking about, sitting or lying down. Then he comes to the conclusion, this is that big bull elephant. Stop here for a moment. So the Buddha says, an experienced elephant woodsman, as soon as he sees a big footprint, he does not immediately come to the conclusion that this is a big bull elephant, because there might be a small she-elephant with a big footprint, or there might be a tall she-elephant with prominent teeth and a big footprint, or there might be a tall she-elephant that have tusks and leave a big footprint. But if he sees that bull elephant in person, then he's convinced. So too, Brahmin, here a Tathagata appears in the world, Arahant, Sammasambuddha, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, sublime, knower of worlds, incomparable leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened, blessed. He declares this world with its gods, its maras and its brahmas, this generation with its recluses and brahmins, its princes and its people, which he has himself realized with direct knowledge. He teaches the Dhamma, good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing, and he reveals a holy life that is utterly perfect and pure. A householder or householder's son, or one born in some other clan, hears that Dhamma. On hearing the Dhamma, he acquires faith in the Tathagata. Possessing that faith, he considers thus, household life is crowded and dusty, life gone forth is wide open. It is not easy while living in a home to lead the holy life, utterly perfect and pure as a polished shell. Suppose I shave off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and go forth from the home life into homelessness. On a later occasion, abandoning a small or a large fortune, abandoning a small or a large circle of relatives, he shaves off his hair and beard, puts on the yellow robe, and goes forth from the home life into homelessness. Having thus gone forth and possessing the monk's training and way of life, abandoning the killing of living beings, he abstains from killing living beings. With rod and weapon laid aside, gentle and kindly, he abides compassionate to all living beings. Abandoning the taking of what is not given, he abstains from taking what is not given, taking only what is given, expecting only what is given. By not stealing, he abides in purity. Abandoning in celibacy, he observes celibacy, living apart, abstaining from the vulgar practice of sexual intercourse. Abandoning false speech, he abstains from false speech. He speaks truth, adheres to truth, is trustworthy and reliable, one who is no deceiver of the world, Abandoning malicious speech, he abstains from malicious speech. He does not repeat elsewhere what he has heard here in order to divide those people from these, nor does he repeat to these people what he has heard elsewhere in order to divide these people from those. Thus he is one who reunites those who are divided, a promoter of friendships, who enjoys concord, rejoices in concord, delights in concord, a speaker of words that promote concord. Abandoning harsh speech, he abstains from harsh speech. He speaks such words as are gentle, pleasing to the ear and lovable, as go to the heart, are courteous, desired by many, and agreeable to many. Abandoning gossip, he abstains from gossip. He speaks at the right time, speaks what is fact, speaks on what is good, speaks on the Dhamma Vinaya. At the right time, he speaks such words as are worth recording, reasonable, moderate, and beneficial. He abstains from injuring seeds and plants. He practices eating only in one part of the day, abstaining from eating at night and outside the proper time. He abstains from dancing, singing, music, and theatrical shows. He abstains from wearing garlands, smartening himself with scent, and embellishing himself with unguents. He abstains from high and large couches. He abstains from accepting gold and silver as money. He abstains from accepting raw grain. He abstains from accepting raw meat. He abstains from accepting women and girls. He abstains from accepting men and women slaves. He abstains from accepting goats and sheep. He abstains from accepting fowl and pigs. He abstains from accepting elephants, cattle, horses, and mares. He abstains from accepting fields and land. He abstains from going on errands and running messages. He abstains from buying and selling. He abstains from false weights, false metals, and false measures. He abstains from cheating, deceiving, defrauding, and trickery. He abstains from wounding, murdering, binding, brigandage, plunder, and violence. I'll stop here for a moment. This is a list of moral conduct that a monk keeps. Here, this sutta is going to several practices of a monk. And these practices are part of the Pali word charana. The charana can be translated as conduct or practice. One of the names of the Buddha, epithets of the Buddha, is Vijja Charana Sampano. One perfect in Vijja is knowledge, and Charana is conduct. One endowed with knowledge and conduct, or one perfect in knowledge and conduct. So here you have a list of what you mean by this word conduct, charana. So the first one is sila. Come to the second one is contentment. He becomes content with robes to protect his body and with alms food to maintain his stomach. And wherever he goes, he sets out taking only these with him. Just as a bird, wherever it goes, flies with its wings as its only burden, so too the monk becomes content with robes to protect his body and with alms food to maintain his stomach. And wherever he goes, he sets out taking only these with him. Possessing this aggregate of noble virtue, he experiences within himself a bliss that is blameless. The third one we are coming into is the guarding the sense doors. On seeing a form with the eye, he does not grasp at its signs and features, since if he left the eye faculty unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and grief might invade him. He practices the way of its restraint. He guards the eye faculty. He undertakes the restraint of the eye faculty. Similarly, on hearing a sound with the ear, smelling an odor with the nose, tasting a flavor with the tongue, touching a tangible with the body, cognizing a mind object with the mind, he does not grasp at its signs and features, since if he left the faculties unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and grief might invade him. He practices the way of the restraint. He guards the faculties, undertakes the restraint of the faculties. Possessing this noble restraint of the faculties, he experiences within himself a bliss that is unsullied. Fourth one, you come into sati sampajanya, recollection and mindfulness. He becomes one who acts in full awareness when going forward and returning, who acts in full awareness when looking ahead and looking away, who acts in full awareness when flexing and extending his limbs, who acts in full awareness when wearing his robes and carrying his outer bowl and robe, his outer robe and bowl, who acts in full awareness when eating, drinking, consuming food and tasting, who acts in full awareness when defecating and urinating, who acts in full awareness when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking and keeping silent. Stop here for a moment. This last list I read is more of sampajanya, mindfulness. Sati is recollecting the four objects of sati, body, feelings, mind, and Dhamma. Okay, the next one we come into is seclusion. Possessing this aggregate of noble virtue, this noble restraint of the faculties, and possessing this noble mindfulness and full awareness, he resorts to a secluded resting place, the forest, the root of a tree, a mountain, a ravine, a hillside cave, a charnel ground, a jungle thicket, an open space, a heap of straw. Now we come to abandoning the hindrances. On returning from his alms round, after his meal, he sits down, folding his legs crosswise, setting his body erect, and establishing mindfulness before him. Abandoning covetousness for the world, he abides with the mind free from covetousness. He purifies his mind from covetousness. Abandoning ill will and hatred, he abides with the mind free from ill will, compassionate for the welfare of all living beings. He purifies his mind from ill will and hatred. Abandoning sloth and torpor, he abides free from sloth and torpor, percipient of light, mindful and fully aware. He purifies his mind from sloth and torpor. Abandoning restlessness and remorse, he abides unagitated, with a mind inwardly peaceful. He purifies his mind from restlessness and remorse. Abandoning doubt, he abides having gone beyond doubt, unperplexed about wholesome states. He purifies his mind from doubt. I stop here for a moment. So here this last description is about abandoning the 5 hindrances. Covetousness, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse, and doubt. Also you notice here, it says when a person attains this state, he's percipient of light. The mind starts to light up because it's a state very near to the first jhana. This light is actually from within, but nowadays some teachers talk about the light outside. So this is the state in now later books they call upachara samadhi, threshold concentration. And then we come to the jhanas. So just now that one was abandoning the hindrances before actually entering jhana. Having thus abandoned these 5 hindrances, imperfections of the mind that weaken wisdom, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, he enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of seclusion. This Brahmin is called a footprint of the Tathagata, something scraped by the Tathagata, something marked by the Tathagata. But a noble disciple does not yet come to the conclusion the Blessed One is fully enlightened. The Dhamma is well proclaimed by the Blessed One. The Sangha is practicing the good way. Again, with the stilling of applied and sustained thought, a monk enters upon and abides in the second jhana, which has self-confidence and singleness of mind without applied and sustained thought, with delight and pleasure born of concentration. This too Brahmin is called a footprint of the Tathagata. But a noble disciple does not yet come to the conclusion the Blessed One is fully enlightened, etc. Again, with the fading away of delight, a monk abides in equanimity, mindful and fully aware, still feeling pleasure with the body. He enters upon and abides in the third jhana. This too is called a footprint of the Tathagata. But a noble disciple does not yet come to the conclusion the Blessed One is fully enlightened. Again, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, a monk enters upon and abides in the fourth jhana. This is called a footprint of the Tathagata, but a noble disciple does not yet come to the conclusion the Blessed One is fully enlightened. I'll stop here for a moment. So up to here, you have this description of charana. In this sutta, you find the first one is sila, the second is contentment, 3, guarding the sense doors, 4, sati sampajanya. Here it translates as full awareness, mindfulness and full awareness. And then the 5th is seclusion, resorts to a secluded resting place. The 6th is abandoning of the hindrances. 7 is the 4 jhanas. So in this sutta, 7 items make up charana, conduct. But this is not complete. If you look at Lady Sayadaw's book, he also has compiled this list of charana. It's also about 7 or 8 items. But I have researched through various suttas in the Nikayas. I find there are 3 other items you can get from other suttas. So combining another 3, you actually get 10 items under charana. 3 other items also very important. One is moderation in eating, bhojana matanyutta. Moderation in eating, eating food only to maintain the body, helping with the practice, not to indulge in eating. Another one is devotion to wakefulness, jagarya no yoga. Jagarya no yoga, devotion to wakefulness, trying to keep awake 24 hours a day. This is a very important one. And the third one is Suttas Dhamma, 7 good qualities. What are these 7 good qualities necessary in a monk's conduct? Saddha, hiri ottappa, bahusacca, virya, sati and panya. Saddha is faith or trust or confidence in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha. Hiri ottappa is a sense of shame and fear of wrongdoing. That's how it's usually translated. Bahusacca is much learning, much hearing of the Dhamma. Virya is energy, energetic effort. Sati is recollection of the 4 objects of sati. Panya is wisdom. So the complete list of charana is these 7 in this sutta, plus another 3. Moderation in eating, devotion to wakefulness, and the 7 good qualities. Okay, so this last part we just read, the 4 jhanas, the Buddha says, are the footprints of the Buddha, because that, the Buddha says, is how he became enlightened. The actual way he walked to enlightenment. So the 4 jhanas. Then the Buddha continues. When his concentrated mind is thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs it to the knowledge of the recollection of past lives. He recollects his manifold past lives, that is 1 birth, 2 births, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 100, 1,000, 100,000, many aeons of world contraction, many aeons of world expansion, many aeons of world contraction and expansion. Thus, with the aspects and particulars, he recollects his manifold past lives. This too, Brahmin, is called a footprint of the Tathagata. But a noble disciple does not yet come to the conclusion the Blessed One is fully enlightened. When his concentrated mind is thus purified, bright and blemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs it to the knowledge of the passing away and reappearance of beings. With the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, he sees beings passing away and reappearing, inferior and superior, fair and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate. He understands how beings pass on according to their actions or karma. So this too, Brahmin, is called a footprint of the Tathagata. But But a noble disciple does not yet come to the conclusion the Blessed One is fully enlightened. When his concentrated mind is thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs it to the knowledge of the destruction of the taints or asavas. He understands as it actually is. This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. These are the taints or asavas. This is the origin of the taints. This is the cessation of the taints. This is the way leading to the cessation of the taints. This too, Brahmin, is called a footprint of the Tathagata, something scraped by the Tathagata, something marked by the Tathagata. But a noble disciple still has not yet come to the conclusion, the Blessed One is fully enlightened, etc. Rather, he is in the process of coming to this conclusion. When he knows and sees thus, his mind is liberated from the taint of sensual desire, being and ignorance. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge it is liberated. He understands birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived, what had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. This too, Brahmin, is called a footprint of the Tathagata, something scraped by the Tathagata, something marked by the Tathagata. It is at this point that a noble disciple has come to the conclusion, the Blessed One is fully enlightened, the Dhamma is well proclaimed by the Blessed One, the Sangha is practicing the good way. And it is at this point, Brahmin, that the simile of the elephant's footprint has been completed in detail. When this was said, the Brahmin Janusoni said to the Blessed One, Magnificent Master Gotama, magnificent Master Gotama. Master Gotama has made the Dhamma clear in many ways, as though he were turning upright what had been overthrown, revealing what was hidden, showing the way to one who was lost, or holding up a lamp in the dark for those with eyesight to see forms. I go to the Master Gotama for refuge, and to the Dhamma and to the Sangha of monks. From today, let Master Gotama remember me as a lay follower who has gone to him for refuge for life. That's the end of the sutta. So you see in this last part, when during the Buddha's time, when they take refuge with the three refuges, it is taking refuge with the Buddha himself, taking refuge with the Dhamma, and the third refuge is the Sangha of monks, Bhikkhu Sangha, Sangha of monks. Sometimes people like to say it's the Aryan Sangha, but actually it's a Sangha of monks. Because when you say Aryan Sangha, who is the Arya? You don't know who is the Arya. How can you take refuge with somebody who you don't know? But monks can be identified by the robe. So you take refuge with the monk Sangha. So the monk Sangha is one of the triple gem. The other thing I'd like you to note is that after the Buddha attained the fourth jhana, he used it to become enlightened. How? You see here, when his concentrated mind is thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, he directs it to the knowledge of the recollection of past lives. Similarly, he directs it to the knowledge of the passing away and reappearance of beings. And thirdly, he directs it to the knowledge of the destruction of the asavas, the three knowledges. So, before the Buddha can actually use his mind to attain the knowledges, he must attain the four jhanas. After he has attained the four jhanas, then the Buddha says the mind becomes bright, purified, unblemished, rid of imperfection, perfect mind, malleable, wieldy, that means can use, steady and attain to imperturbability, that means solid as a rock, cannot move, cannot be disturbed by anything. Then only he can use it to become enlightened. Without the four jhanas, the Buddha says it is impossible to attain anagamin and arhanhood, the third and the fourth fruitions. So this is another thing that's important. Okay, from this sutta, we learn that the conduct of a monk or the practice of the monk consists of 10 things. The first one is sila, second is contentment, third is guarding the sense doors, fourth is here it says mindfulness and full awareness, sati sampajanya, or recollection and mindfulness. Fifth that I've added is moderation in eating. Then 6 is devotion to wakefulness. 7 is the 7 good qualities. And then 8 is seclusion, going to a secluded place to practice. 9 is meditating and abandoning the hindrances, getting rid of the hindrances. 10 is entering the jhanas, the 4 jhanas. So this is the conduct or practice of a monk. And then after attaining the 4 jhanas, the Buddha said, he used it to attain the 3 knowledges and become enlightened. So you see, the Buddha in this sutta says the footprints of the Buddha, how the Buddha walked to the path the Buddha walked to enlightenment. Firstly, is the first footprint is the first jhana. Second is the second jhana. Third jhana, fourth jhana, and then the 3 knowledges, recollecting the past lives, seeing beings passing away and reappearing with the divine eye or the heavenly eye. And then the third knowledge is understanding the 4 noble truths and destroying the asavas, the taints. So these are the footprints of the Buddha. So nowadays, some people find it hard to attain the jhanas, and they say jhanas are not necessary. But in the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha said this is one of the 5 conditions leading to the disappearance of the true Dhamma. When you start to belittle samadhi, the Buddha says these 5 conditions lead to the disappearance of the true Dhamma. Belittling the Buddha, belittling the Dhamma, belittling the Sangha, belittling the training in Sila Samadhi Panya. And then the 5th one is belittling Samadhi, saying that Samadhi jhanas are not necessary and all that. This is totally opposite to the Buddha's teaching, because here you can see very clearly the Buddha says his footsteps to enlightenment firstly the 4 jhanas, and then the 3 knowledges, and then only he became enlightened. Some people belittle the jhanas. Some other people also belittle the psychic powers. These 3 knowledges, like recollecting the past lives, it is a psychic power. And then the heavenly eye or divine eye, being able to see beings passing away and taking rebirth, passing away and taking rebirth. This is another psychic power. So psychic powers are actually footprints of the Buddha. It's a way to enlightenment. It is not something that is to be belittled in the Buddha's teachings. It is part and parcel of the way to enlightenment. These are abhinyas, higher knowledges, supernormal powers that an ordinary person would not be able to get. Okay, the other thing I like to say is that so this is actually the actual way the Buddha walked to enlightenment, the jhanas, and then the psychic powers, and then contemplating the 4 noble truths and attaining enlightenment. Now, in the Hinayana school, later books, which use the later books like Abhidhamma and the commentaries and the Visuddhimagga and the sub-commentaries and all that, they teach differently. They say the way to enlightenment is not through the jhanas, but through the jnanas, the 16 jnanas. The 16 jnanas were written 900 years after the Buddha's passing away by Buddha Ghosa. And people like Mahasi Sayadaw, he used it to create Mahasi method of meditation, which you find is totally not found in the suttas, in the original words of the Buddha. It's something he created. That's why it's called Mahasi method of meditation. It's not called the Buddha's method of meditation, but called Mahasi method. And nowadays you have Goenka method. Oh, this is not the Buddha's method. These vipassana methods, they say that jhana is not necessary. But here you can see from the sutta, without the 4 jhanas, the mind cannot be, like the Buddha says here, purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attain to imperturbability. Only with such a mind, you can direct it, the Buddha says, to whatever knowledge you want to attain in the suttas. That's how the Buddha developed the mind. That's why when a person attains the jhanas, the mind is said to be developed. Meditation is synonymous with developing the mind, bhavana. Bhavana, the word bhavana means a developed mind, a mind that is rid of the 5 hindrances. So the Hinayana school, the later schools, they talk about pure vipassana, they talk about the 16 jhanas, which contradicts the suttas. The Mahayana, on the other hand, also teach wrongly by saying that the path to enlightenment is by making vows, bodhisattva vows, and cultivating the paramis. The paramis are later teachings. You find the suttas, no mention of paramis. The paramis are worldly qualities, generosity, speaking the truth, all this, keeping moral conduct and all that. So this is later, these two are later Buddhist teachings, the Hinayana school and the Mahayana school. We don't want to practice these two. We want to practice original Buddhism, rely only on the suttas of the Buddha, as the Buddha advised. So here the Buddha says that when a noble disciple becomes enlightened, then he is fully convinced that the Buddha is fully enlightened, the Dhamma is well proclaimed, and the Sangha is practicing the good way. Because when a person becomes enlightened, then he is one with the Buddha. It's like seeing the big bull elephant face to face. That's why the Buddha says at this point only, that person is fully convinced that it's a big bull elephant. Hati Pado Pama Sutta, the greater discourse on the simile of the elephant's footprint. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. There, the Venerable Sariputta addressed the monks thus: "Friends, monks, friends," they replied. The Venerable Sariputta said, "Friends, just as the footprint of any living being that walks can be placed within an elephant's footprint, and so the elephant's footprint is declared the chief of them because of its great size, so too all wholesome dhammas can be included in the Four Noble Truths. In what four? The Noble Truth of suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the way leading to the cessation of suffering." And stop here for a moment. So here, just like the elephant's footprint is the chief because it's the biggest. Similarly, of all the dhammas, the chief is the Four Noble Truths. The most important is the Four Noble Truths. As we saw in the previous sutta, the Buddha became enlightened by contemplating the Four Noble Truths. And what is the Noble Truth of suffering? Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are suffering. Not to obtain what one wants is suffering. In short, the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. And what are the 5 aggregates of clinging? They are the material form aggregate or body aggregate affected of clinging, the feeling aggregate, perception aggregate, volition aggregate, and consciousness aggregates of clinging. And what is the material form or body aggregate of clinging? It is the 4 great elements, and the material form derived from the 4 great elements. And what are the 4 great elements? They are the earth element, water element, fire element, and air element. What, friends, is the earth element? The earth element may be either internal or external. And what is the internal earth element? Whatever internally belonging to oneself is solid, solidified, and clung to, that is, head, hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinew, bone, marrow, kidney, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lung, bowel, entrail, gorge, dung, whatever else internally, belonging to oneself, is solid, solidified, and clung to. This is called the internal earth element. Now, both the internal earth element and the external earth element are simply earth element. And that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the earth element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the earth element. Now there comes a time when the water element is disturbed and the external earth element vanishes, when even this external earth element, great as it is seen to be impermanent, subject to destruction, disappearance and change. What of this body which is clung to by craving and lasts but a while? There can be no considering that as I or mine or I am. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says that sometimes the water element is disturbed. I guess the floods arise, like the story of in the Bible of the Noah's Ark, where the whole world was flooded. So when the whole world is flooded, then the external earth element vanishes. You don't see the earth. To continue. So then, if others abuse, revile, scold or harass a monk who has seen this element as it actually is, he understands thus, this unpleasant feeling born of ear contact has arisen in me. That is dependent, not independent. Dependent on what? Dependent on contact. Then he sees that contact is impermanent, that feeling is impermanent, that perception is impermanent, that volition is impermanent, and that consciousness is impermanent. And his mind, having made an element its objective support, enters into that new objective support and acquires confidence, steadiness, and decision. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says that when a monk is scolded, then he knows those words arise because of ear contact. And similarly, contact is impermanent, feeling is impermanent, perception, volition, and consciousness are impermanent. So this sound is part of the guess here has to do with state of the body. The body has the 6 senses. So the sound is part of the 6 senses. So basically, here the sutta says the mind having made an element is objective support. I guess the mind if the monk meditates on one of the elements, and then the mind becomes one-pointed, then it acquires confidence, steadiness, and decision. So it won't be moved easily by sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch and thoughts. Now, if others attack that monk in ways that are unwished for, undesired, and disagreeable, by contact with fists, cloths, sticks, or knives, he understands thus, this body is of such a nature that contact with fists, cloths, sticks, and knives assail it. But this has been said by the Blessed One in his advice on the simile of the saw. Monks, even if bandits were to sever you savagely limb by limb with a 2-handled saw, he who gave rise to a mind of hatred towards them would not be carrying out my teaching. So tireless energy shall be aroused in me, and unremitting mindfulness established. My body shall be tranquil and untroubled, my mind concentrated and unified. Now let contact with fists, cloths, sticks, and knives assail this body, for this is just how the Buddha's teaching is practiced. Stop here for a moment. So here you see, the Buddha is saying that a monk should practice so that the mind becomes so concentrated that even if he is attacked, or even if he is sawn limb by limb by bandits, his mind will be tranquil and untroubled, concentrated and unified. So in the Buddha's teaching, you can only practice this with a strong mind. Without a mind that has attained to concentration, it is impossible to practice the Buddha's teaching. Not to be affected by words, not to be affected by fists, cloths, sticks and knives. So you see here, the Buddha's teaching is to be practiced with the jhanas. When that monk thus recollects the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, if equanimity supported by the wholesome does not become established in him, then he arouses a sense of urgency thus: it is a loss for me, it is no gain for me, it is bad for me, it is no good for me, that when I thus recollect the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, equanimity supported by the wholesome does not become established in me. Just as when a daughter-in-law sees her father-in-law, she arouses a sense of urgency to please him. So too, when that monk does recollect the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, if equanimity supported by the wholesome does not become established in him, then he arouses a sense of urgency. But if when he recollects the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, equanimity supported by the wholesome becomes established in him, then he is satisfied with it. At that point, monks, much has been done by that monk. I stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says that if a monk recollects the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, equanimity supported by the wholesome should become established in him. If not, he should arouse a sense of urgency to cultivate it. What is this equanimity? This equanimity in the Suttas is pure in the fourth jhana. In the fourth jhana, when a monk attains the fourth jhana, then the mind becomes equanimous and imperturbable, unshakable. That is real equanimity. So the Buddha is saying, if a monk has not attained the fourth jhana, then he should have a sense of urgency to cultivate it. And what, friends, is the water element? The water element may be internal or external. What is the internal water element? Whatever internally belonging to oneself is water, watery and clung to. That is bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tear, grease, spittle, snot, all of the joint urine. Or whatever else internally belonging to oneself is water, watery and clung to. That is the internal water element. Now both the internal water element and the external water element are simply water element, and that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the water element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the water element. Now, there comes a time when the external water element is disturbed. It carries away villages, towns, cities, districts, and countries. There comes a time when the waters in the great ocean sink down 100 leagues, 200 leagues, 300 leagues, 400, 500, 600, 700. There comes a time when the waters in the great ocean stand 7 palms deep, 6 palms deep, 2 palms, only a palm deep. There comes a time when the waters in the great oceans stand 7 fathoms deep, 6 fathoms, 2 fathoms, only a fathom deep. There comes a time when the waters in the great ocean stand half a fathom deep, only waist deep, only knee deep, only ankle deep. There comes a time when the waters in the great ocean are not enough to wet even the joint of a finger. When even this external water element, great as it is seen to be impermanent, subject to destruction, disappearance, and change. What of this body which is clung to by craving and lasts but a while? There can be no considering that as I or mine or I am. So then, if others abuse, revile, scold, and harass a monk who has seen this element as it actually is, he understands thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. At that point, too, monks, much has been done by that monk. So here the Buddha is saying that there comes a time when the water starts to disappear. That is when the world is contracting. The stars are coming closer and closer to each other. And after a long time, a second sun will come into our solar system. When that happens, all living beings will die. The plants also will die. And then the rivers and the oceans start to become shallower and shallower. And slowly, as third sun, a fourth sun, until 6 suns come, then the water in the ocean also would have disappeared and the world starts to smoke. When the seventh sun comes, it will all burn and come together into a huge mass. So the Buddha is saying that even the external this water element are so large, like the ocean, can even disappear. What about this body? This body consists also the same elements, earth, water, fire, and wind. They last only even much shorter time. So how can you take it to be I or mine? What, friends, is the fire element? The fire element may be either internal or external. What is the internal fire element? Whatever internally belonging to oneself is fire, fiery and clung to. That is that by which one is warmed, ages and is consumed, and that by which what is eaten, drunk, consumed and tasted gets completely digested. And whatever else internally belonging to oneself is fire, fiery and clung to. This is called the internal fire element. Now both the internal fire element and the external fire element are simply fire element, and that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the fire element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the fire element. Now there comes a time when the external fire element is disturbed. It burns up villages, towns, cities, districts and countries. It goes out due to lack of fuel only when it comes to green grass or to a road or to a rock or to water or to a fair open space. There comes a time when they seek to make a fire even with cock's feathers and hide parings, when even this external fire element, great as it is seen to be impermanent, subject to destruction, disappearance and change. What of this body which is clung to by craving and lasts but a while? There can be no considering that as I or mine or I am. So then, if others abuse, revile, scold and harass a monk who has seen this element as it actually is, he understands thus, this is not I, this is not mine, this is not myself. At that point too, friends, much has been done by that monk. So here the Venerable Sariputta is saying that this external fire element, sometimes it is so huge, so big, that it can burn villages, towns, cities, districts and countries. But there's another time when it disappears, and to make a small fire also is so difficult. You have to use cock's feathers and hide parings. So the Venerable Sariputta is saying that the external fire element, so great also, can disappear. What of this body? This body also has the fire element, and it lasts only a while. So how can you take it as I or mine? What, friends, is the air element? The air element may be internal or external. What is the internal air element? Whatever internally belonging to oneself is air, airy and clung to. That is, upgoing winds, downgoing winds, winds in the belly, winds in the bowels, winds that course through the limbs, in-breath and out-breath, or whatever else internally belonging to oneself is air, airy and clung to. This is called the internal air element. Now both the internal air element and the external air element are simply air element, and that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with the air element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the air element. Now there comes a time when the external air element is disturbed. It sweeps away villages, towns, cities, districts and countries. There comes a time in the last month of the hot season when they seek wind by means of a fan or bellows and even the strands of straw in the drip fringe of the thatch that do not stir. When even this external air element, great as it is seen to be impermanent, subject to destruction, disappearance and change, what of this body which is clung to by craving and lasts but a while? There can be no considering that as I or mine or I am. So then, if others abuse, revile, scold and harass a monk who has seen this element as it actually is, he understands thus, this is not mine, this is not I, this is not myself. At that point too, monks, friends, much has been done by that monk. So here, Venerable Sariputta is saying sometimes the external air element is disturbed and whole towns and districts and countries can be swept away. You imagine the tornado in America when they come, they suck up everything to the sky. So, but there comes a time when not even the thatch of the roof moves and it becomes so hot you need a fan. So he's saying that the wind also is impermanent, what of this body which has the wind element in it, lasts only a short while. Friends, just as when a space is enclosed by timber and creepers, grass and clay, it comes to be termed house. So too, when a space is enclosed by bones and sinews, flesh and skin, it comes to be termed material form or body. If, friends, internally the eye is intact, but no external forms comes within its range, and there is no corresponding conscious engagement, then there is no manifestation of the corresponding class of consciousness. If internally the eye is intact, and external forms come into his range, but there is no corresponding conscious engagement, then there is no manifestation of the corresponding class of consciousness. But when internally the eye is intact and external forms come into its range, and there is the corresponding conscious engagement, then there is the manifestation of the corresponding class of consciousness. So here he's saying that a form comes before our eye, and there is contact, we pay attention, then the consciousness will arise. The material form in what has thus come to be is included in the material form aggregate or body aggregate of clinging. The feeling, perception, volition, consciousness is included in the five aggregates. He understands thus, this indeed is how there comes to be the inclusion, gathering and amassing of things into these five aggregates of clinging. Now this has been said by the Blessed One. One who sees dependent origination sees the Dhamma. One who sees the Dhamma sees dependent origination. And these five aggregates of clinging are dependently arisen. The desire, indulgence, inclination and holding based on these five aggregates of clinging is the origin of suffering. The removal of desire and lust, the abandoning of desire and lust for these five aggregates of clinging is the cessation of suffering. At that point too, friends, much has been done by that monk. So here he's saying that even the five aggregates are dependently arisen, and due to conditions they also cease. So if we let go of the desire and lust for these five aggregates, then there is cessation of suffering. If, friends, internally the ear is intact but no external sounds comes into its range. Similarly, if the nose is intact but no external smells comes into its range, etc., then there is no manifestation of the corresponding class of consciousness. But when there is contact, then there is a corresponding arising, the corresponding class of consciousness arises. So he repeats that the five aggregates are dependently arisen, and the desire, indulgence, inclination and holding based on these five aggregates, effect of clinging, is the origin of suffering. The removal of desire and lust, the abandoning of desire and lust for these five aggregates of clinging is the cessation of suffering. At that point too, friends, much has been done by that monk. That is what the Venerable Sariputta said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Venerable Sariputta's words. The end of the sutta. So this sutta is about more on the four elements. So the simile of the elephant's footprint is only used in the beginning when he says that the elephant's footprint is the chief of all footprints. Similarly, the Four Noble Truths is the chief of all Dhammas. And then after that, he explains a little on the Noble Truth of Suffering. And Noble Truth of Suffering, inside there it says, in short, the 5 aggregates of attachment are suffering. And then he goes into the 5 aggregates. And when he goes into the 5 aggregates, he talks about the material form consisting of the 4 elements. And after that, he goes into the 4 elements. He tries to show that we have the 4 elements inside us. And outside of our body is also to be found the 4 elements. And the 4 elements in the world is also impermanent. After a long time, you can see they also disappear. So he says, in this body, similarly, the 4 elements will also disappear. But the time is much shorter. So since the 4 elements in us last only for a short time, how can we take this body consisting of the 4 elements to be I and mine? Well, that's the end of the sutta. Stop here.
Sutta 7, paragraph of 18. You mentioned the monk meditate after his meal. Doesn't it make the monk sleepy after eating?
A monk is not supposed to eat too much. If we eat too much, then it's easier to become sleepy. But also, if a monk has already attained jhana, then as I mentioned the other night, that the 5 hindrances have been eliminated. So because the 5 hindrances have been eliminated, he doesn't become so sleepy like an ordinary person with the 5 hindrances. So you can see people who have not attained the jhana and get rid of the 5 hindrances when they meditate, sometimes they have so much sloth and torpor, they're half asleep. You can see that the body is going down like that. But if a person has already attained it, he can be tired. He can be, sometimes when he's very tired, he cannot stop the head from falling down. But he doesn't become totally full of sloth and torpor like some people. So if he has already attained samadhi, even after his meal, he might be have a bit of might feel a bit sleepy. But once he starts to practice, the mind will light up again.
Can one attain samadhi in walking meditation?
If a person has already attained very strong samadhi, it probably can. But then when he attains the jhana, he will fall down. His body will fall down. He can't.
So is it advisable for beginners to do walking meditation or better?
Sitting is much better. If you want to improve, sitting is much better. But for some people, when the sloth and torpor is too strong, they find they cannot sit at all, and they walk. Yeah.